Well, the other thing he said that other people that I haven't seen people pick up on is that he slammed the president of Israel, Isaac Herzog, who's mostly there in the presidency is a ceremonial position in Israel, but Herzog refuses to pardon. He has the ability to call for a pardon of Netanyahu for all of his corruption prosecutions, and Trump is calling for Netanyahu to basically be pardoned and exonerated for all of these indictments he faces after he leaves office. And this is part of the Israeli influence on Netanyahu, on Donald Trump, that he's actually lobbying for Netanyahu and interfering in the Israeli system of justice. I mean, it got to the point where Lindsey Graham, Trump's top ally in the Senate, top warmonger in the Senate, actually went and sat in the witness booth for Netanyahu during one of the hearings that he faced in order to send a signal that Washington is on his side and that you'll be in trouble if you prosecute him. So Trump is like, he's siding with a faction inside Israel, a power mafia inside Israel. And we've seen presidents do that more quietly. Bill Clinton sided against Netanyahu, but this is highly significant because he's once again interfered in Israeli politics on behalf of the billionaires who control him, who are Likudnik billionaires. And so he said he would win 99% of the vote in Israel. That's also kind of ironic or telling because Trump is historically unpopular in the U.S. Yeah. His war in Iran is historically unpopular. He is at a much lower approval rating than most second-term incumbent presidents are at this stage in their presidency. So he's boasting about his popularity in Israel. Well, I can think of another president who said that they were more popular in Israel than the U.S. at the end of their term, and it was George W. Bush. His final address as president, where he was received with warm applause, was in the Knesset in Jerusalem. I think he was the first U.S. president to address the Knesset. And they were thanking him for all the wars that he waged on their behalf and the free hand that he gave Ariel Sharon and his successor, Ehud Olmert, to destroy the last iterations of Palestinian resistance to occupation in the West Bank and build the apartheid wall. There's a memorial, there's a monument for George W. Bush, a small monument in Jerusalem. And I'm sure there will be a lot more for Donald Trump, who's basically given Israel the store and done everything they could have wanted and more.
I didn't know there was a monument of George W. Bush in Israel. That's wild.
It is. I didn't either until I went there and came across it and vomited in my mouth, along with other figures, and kind of a PR disaster for Iran. The neocons in Washington loved this even as they condemned it because it made it harder to make a nuclear deal with Iran. And Israel was playing up the worst Holocaust denier ever. Now, Israeli sources are feeding this story to their main kind of source or channel at the New York Times, Ronan Bergman, who's a veteran Israeli intelligence reporter, that they actually saw Mahmoud Ahmadinejad as the Iranian Delcy Rodriguez. And I find it highly questionable, even though Israel has a long history of supporting anti-Jewish elements around the world. It's hard to imagine because this is how the story goes, according to the New York Times. That I knew that Ahmadinejad's home had been struck. It was sort of considered a form of house arrest. He was mostly confined to his home, but he was said in Tehran to be accessible and he would talk to people on his street. He wasn't exactly a prisoner, but the story is that he was being held there as a de facto hostage of the quote unquote regime, and that Israel struck with, I think, drone strikes his home in order to kill his IRGC guards and allow him to just kind of like run out in the street and be free. And then he would somehow become the next leader. They wound up wounding him. They wound up killing a few of his guards. He was taken to the hospital and barely survived. And, honestly, to me, it looked like a botched attempt to kill him for, all the naughty things he said about the Jewish state. And now they're spinning it to make it seem as though they had a plan in the beginning. But it sounds like one of the most harebrained, insane plans I've ever heard. It doesn't make sense. I think this also might have been a plan they sold Donald Trump to make him think there was a Delcy Rodriguez just to get the U.S. in this war, because Israel has Trump right where they want him. Trump doesn't have Trump right where he wants himself. The global economy has been destroyed. He's an idiot. He's been revealed as one of the most shallow dupes for his Israeli masters. I mean, it's unbelievable. He did not actually think Iran would close the Strait of Hormuz. He did not think they'd be able to retaliate. He's being told that Iran's navy is destroyed, even as the Pentagon Joint Chief Chairman Dan Kane testifies that there are too many small boats for the U.S. to be able to open up the Strait of Hormuz. And essentially, they've been defeated at this point and have achieved no military objectives. Trump fired all the experts who warned him about this at the urging of Laura Loomer. And now so perhaps this was the plan he was sold on, but I find it to be bizarre. The only interesting details in this story that I thought might have backed it up were that Ahmadinejad traveled to Hungary and Guatemala. I don't know if that's true or not, but I mean, those are countries whose governments are very close to Israel, where, he could have spoken to Mossad operatives.
Well, Trump was supposed to strike Iran on Tuesday. Tuesday came and he said, we're actually not going to do that. It's probably going to be in a couple of days, Monday or Tuesday, or, he's just extending it. And the reality is, do you think Trump is just playing dumb and trying to fool the public? Or do you think he really does believe that he could just beat Iran?
I think Trump may have convinced himself that he can do serious damage to Iran's infrastructure and force a deal, because right now Iran is not willing to do a deal. And the U.S. terms are the Israelis' terms. The Israeli terms are designed to violate all of Iran's red lines. A red line would be Iran has to surrender its enriched uranium and hand it over to the United States, which, by the way, Venezuela did today. I don't even know how much they had. They basically have to surrender their deterrence and their national rights. And they're not going to do it, especially after the last round of conflict where Iran demonstrated that it could deter the U.S. and do serious damage in an asymmetrical fashion. So Trump may have convinced himself that he can do this, and he may go back to war at 4:05 p.m. on Friday when the markets close for an extended period, because there is a stock blackout for Memorial Day. That's when Trump likes to go to war, and he might do so under cover of negotiations as he did in the past. They just, kind of manipulated the markets today by feeding stories about Pakistani brokered possible deal that was minutes away between the U.S. and Iran, and it sent the price of Brent crude down $10 a barrel. But it's not going to achieve any military objectives. They will kill lots of people. They will harm Iran's economy. People will suffer, but it will not achieve any goal. It will not open the Strait of Hormuz. And I think the military planners around Trump, the more serious people who deal with issues like procurement, understand this, which is why they leaked to the Washington Post today a report that the U.S. spent more of its own munition stockpile defending Israel than Israel did, and that Israel was actually holding on to its cartridges of Arrow 2 and 3 interceptors, while the U.S. was spending its own THAAD stockpile, which it had repurposed from its stocks that it was going to use to defend, for example, Taiwan and Ukraine. So this is a massive admission that Israel is a strategic liability to U.S. national security and to U.S. empire. Ukraine and Taiwan are much more valuable imperial pieces to the US than Israel, because they are there to contain, weaken, and counter the two major rivals to American unipolar control, Russia and China. Israel, what value does it have? It just terrorizes its small neighbors. And as one military planner, who I think was someone pretty high up in the Pentagon, said to the Washington Post, Israel could never fight and win a war on its own. They've just never been put in that position because we always back them up. So this next round of war, if Trump does it, will be a disaster for U.S. empire. And at the same time, Trump is too stupid to know that.
But does he not understand that, like, you know, Iran, from what I understand, they have gone deeper and deeper underground with their weapons. So you can't defeat them by air, and that would mean you would have to bring in ground troops, and that would be a disaster.
Yes, that's a great point. I mean, Iran's missile cities worked. They kept hitting this one missile city near Isfahan and another near Yazd, and they kept digging it out, and they're all dug out now. They gave it everything they had. So then what could the U.S. do? They could maybe take two islands, one of them being Karg Island, and then what? You're just there, and then all of a sudden, FPV drones start buzzing in on you, and you have no ability to intercept them or jam them. You're just like the Israelis in southern Lebanon. Shahid drones, mobile artillery. Maybe you're fighting some much more determined, motivated IRGC forces. Iran actually carried out successful sorties with its own air force against U.S. bases in the Gulf. So there are all kinds of ways that U.S. troops could just be ground down after taking these islands. The other one would be like Chabahar, which is more of a amphibious invasion against some coastal territory that's sort of flat, like with straight beaches. But 13 soldiers have died. Hundreds more have been wounded in various ways. And the Iranians have this mantra of come closer, because more U.S. troops will certainly die, be captured. They will not be featured in Michael Bay films. And that will be a political catastrophe for Donald Trump at an already low point in his presidency. And this all raises the question, is this why he's doing Cuba now? Because he wants a few days of headlines and to go back to the Don Road Doctrine, facing a much militarily weaker target, and repeat the Venezuela scenario. Is that why he's doing it? Whether or not that's why he's doing it, there's a conclusion to be drawn that speaks volumes about the modern GOP under Donald Trump, which ran kind of as more nakedly as a white people's party under Trump than under any other Republican candidate. They might have had like diverse conventions, but the main rallying cry of Trump was, America first and mass deportations. And they're the most decisive moves that they are making on the world stage, which makes them therefore the most decisive moves, period, are being done because he's catering to very small ethnic interest groups in the United States. A small fraction of extremely wealthy, racist Jewish Americans who support the GOP. Remember, most Jews are Democrats and don't support Trump. But the ones who are Republicans tend to be extremely wealthy, extremely racist, and more religious than Jewish Democrats. And he's catering to what I call the Gusano industrial complex of Cuban Americans, Venezuelan Americans who are in Miami and are just here to use the United States as a base for destroying the governments of their former countries. That's why he's doing Cuba. And this will be, it will be catastrophic in a way that I don't think that Venezuela was not. Venezuela has remained stable because of the very conciliatory nature of its government, which saw an option of basically staying in power, selling out a whole lot to the United States, or allowing some right-wing fanatic like Maria Corina Machado to come in and start a kind of civil war and purge their base and purge the cooperatives that they'd established, and which would lead to a bloodbath, following the bloodbath of confronting the US military. So they went for the kind of humiliation ritual that we're seeing in Caracas now. I don't think Cuba is going to go for that. So it's kind of an unprecedented scenario.
And then they went to Cuba, and that is, from what I understood, they were actually from Spain. So
I didn't know that. What I know is that he, like Ted Cruz, falsely claimed that his parents fled from the evil Castro regime, when in fact they left Cuba under Batista, the US-backed dictator.
Yeah.
Ted Cruz told the same lie. I don't know if they were born in Spain, but he's definitely a typical Cuban American from Miami who wants to see regime change, and he's very passionate about it. I was watching his press conference today. He was asked about Iran, and he kind of shrugged off the question. Then he shrugs off Ebola, and he says, well, Ebola's over in Africa, but Cuba's 90 miles away, and he's so passionate about it. This is his passion project. And he's determined to bring regime change. They would prefer to do it without directly sending in the military. The Cuban military has prepared for some 60 years or so for this scenario. It doesn't, and it would be unclear to me whether they just be able to waltz in as they did in Caracas and pick up Raul Castro or various Cuban revolutionary leaders as though they were waiting for an Uber, as though some hidden deal had been struck. So what they're doing is as Trump said, they're starving the Cuban people. This is a crime tantamount to genocide. They're depriving them of energy. We sent a reporter across Cuba Danny Shaw, who's an academic who speaks Spanish. He speaks the dialect. He lived as the Cuban people did, went all the way to Santiago, by car, by horse and buggy. I actually did the same thing when I was much younger, back during the end of the special period in 2000. But he did this year, and what he found were depopulated villages, children who were simply not getting food at school anymore. The government stores were completely empty. To get antibiotics, people had to go to the black market, which was really one of the main places of life where things are sold in the private economy, which exists parallel to the state economy. And these privatized stores, which were allowed as part of the normalization under Obama, if you have dollars, you can go in there and order an ice cream or like a lobster dish, and you can live pretty well. And that privatized part of the economy is connected to Miami. So they've found a wedge in the Cuban Revolution through these through the privatization that's already allowed. And what Rubio wants to do is distribute $100 million in U.S. taxpayer money through those private businesses and through what he calls charities, which are NGOs that are connected to the State Department, and overwhelm what's left of the Cuban state and essentially devour it. That would lead to regime change. And then they demand a multi-party system in which anyone who participated in the revolution is banned. So fundamentally undemocratic. The multi-party system would be a procedural, neoliberal bourgeois democracy like you see in like Panama or any of the countries where the US has total control. And then that's a wrap. And so the Cuban leadership is not going to do that. They're not giving them the opportunity for a deal. And it really all goes to the ideological zealotry of the Miami Mafia that produced Marco Rubio. And they sent F-22s to shoot down balloons that they said were from China. It turned out
Yep.
they were hobby balloons, right?
Or weather balloons,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. I mean, it was just mass panic. And that's what the United States did. If there were foreign flights again and again by Cuban pilots dropping leaflets over US cities, urging Americans to rebel and violently rise up against their government, what do you think the US would do? I mean, it would be, they wouldn't let them, they would not let that happen once.
It wouldn't.
Yeah, they would not allow that. No country would allow that. Cuba didn't allow that, but they gave this group, Brothers to the Rescue, which was a fake humanitarian group operating out of Miami under the rubric of a network of CIA-backed, what they called themselves militant organizations. They were terrorist organizations, hell-bent on regime change. Brothers to the Rescue flew over Cuba something like 24 times. Throughout 1995, the Cuban government was protesting with the Clinton administration, telling them, stop these flights. They're violating our airspace. We cannot tolerate this. They're dropping pamphlets telling people to violently rise up. We are a sovereign nation. The Clinton administration reacted, I think, mostly rationally. And by January 1996, you had the key White House point man on Cuba, Richard Nucio, and the Transportation Secretary, Federico Pena, beseeching the FAA, Federal Aviation Authority, not to allow these flights. For whatever reason, in February 1996, the FAA allowed the Brothers to the Rescue flights, a series of flights over Cuba, and they were finally shot down. I said they were a part of a network of CIA-backed terrorist organizations. Brothers to the Rescue was part of a network of groups that had overseen bombings inside Cuba, including the bombing of a Cuban civilian airliner, Cubana 455, which was flying from Barbados to Jamaica. 73 people, including the Cuban fencing team, like world-class Olympic fencing team, were killed. The bombs were placed by Luis Posada Carriles and Orlando Bosch. Posada Carriles was a CIA asset who was managed, cultivated, recruited, directed by the CIA. He had his own personal CIA handler. These documents are all online. Anyone can see the CIA documents. And Luis Posada Carriles was freed from prison. He was able to apply for U.S. citizenship in 2006. I don't know if he got it. And he died an old man in his bed in Miami, along with Orlando Bosch. And Miami in 1983 actually inaugurated Orlando Bosch Day to honor him for his great contributions, including carrying out terrorist attacks. I mean, this was one of many terrorist attacks. So this is what Cuba has been up against, and we can now see what they're up against. They're not even hiding it. There's an aircraft carrier parked off Cuban shores. And
It's crazy.
At any moment, Cuba could be invaded, carpet bombed, invaded by special forces. It's a very dark time.
But it's just nobody stops Israel from doing this. I mean, like, for those who don't understand, like, those are international waters. You can't just, that's essentially piracy. When you board someone's boat and you kidnap them and imprison them. And
well, we should, and you know, we should first of all honor the courage of those humanitarians on the flotillas. They're the real brothers and sisters to the rescue, and they're not backed by the CIA, or they're backed by the people to break the blockade of the modern day Auschwitz, the modern day concentration camp, and they're confronting the Nazis of our time. And everyone can see it now, thanks to Ben Gvir, thanks to that spectacle. So in many ways, they scored a major public relations win for humanity by exposing Israel. It's unfortunate they couldn't reach Gaza to help people and feed them and just to engage with them. I remember the two or three times I was in Gaza, just people were so desperate to talk to someone from the outside. It's like when you go visit a prison. Ben-Gvir is the security minister in Netanyahu's cabinet. He's from a party it's called Otzma Yehudit, but that translates to Jewish power. You could think of it like in terms of like a supremacist, an openly supremacist party. It's grown from a very small party into one of the more popular parties in Israel because of the racist, fascist direction, the trajectory of Jewish Israeli youth. And he holds the linchpin to Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition, along with some ultra-Orthodox parties that don't want to participate in the military. And he exploits that to the hilt. He successfully just rammed through, or not didn't ram it through, he managed to put on the floor of the Knesset a very popular vote to execute Palestinian prisoners. You can find footage of him online of him posing beside a execution room where there's a noose dangling in the middle of the room. Shades of the Jim Crow South. For his birthday, he was gifted a cake with a noose on it. He is a disciple of the late Rabbi Meir Kahane, who was the first major public figure in Israel after moving from New York, where he helped form the Jewish Defense League and was an FBI informant. He came to Israel and started a party called Kach, which campaigned for the full ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. And he said something that was correct, which is that you can't have a Jewish and democratic state. You can be Jewish or democratic, not because Jews are undemocratic, but because if you are going to have an ethno state, you can't have all these other people here who are not Jewish voting and pretend to have a democracy. They're eventually going to, outbreed you, and then they can vote in their own person, or they will compromise our ability to have this supremacist state. So the best thing we can do is just kick them all out. And so it's been, and that was how a lot of Jewish Israelis felt at the time. This was in the, I think, late 1980s. The Likud party base agreed in a lot of ways with Kahane. He was winning many fans. And so under Yitzhak Shamir, the Likudnik prime minister, they actually banned him. They banned his party. And then they went and said to, the New York Times and the Western political class, we banned him because he's a racist and he sounds like the Nazis. But that's not why they banned him. They banned him because he was a competitor and a rival. So flash forward, his disciple Ben-Gvir does this sickening display of torturing European citizens who had come to bring aid to Gaza, and also to confront the blockade. They'd been, beaten before. We've heard stories of even a female flotilla activist being sexually brutalized and assaulted before, but he put it all on camera. He made them look like the Palestinians in the torture dungeons. You can't do that. So the European ambassadors all summon the European governments all summon the Israeli ambassadors. Giorgia Meloni, the right-wing prime minister of Italy, condemns Israel and says, you can't treat our citizens like this. This is disgusting. The Israeli foreign minister, Gideon Sa'ar, from the right-wing racist Likud party, condemns Ben-Gvir. The Israeli ambassador to the United States, Yakir Leiter, who was a settlement activist in his youth, condemns Ben-Gvir and says, these are not our values. Next thing you know, they're tweeting out pictures of themselves giving water to the flotilla activists. Oh, they're so humanitarian and kind. We know what their values are. They do this to Palestinians day in and day out, and nobody condemns them or summons their ambassadors. So Ben-Gvir has caused a major PR crisis for Israel by exposing what it truly is, what its true values are, what militant Zionism in its contemporary form is. And now everyone can see it thanks to these brave flotilla activists who are willing to take the blows and the torture and are now some of them are still in hospitals. But Ben-Gvir is just the true face of Israel today. And we have to confront that. When you confront Zionism in its current form, it's Ben-Gvir. Israel has invaded southern Lebanon, and they've placed themselves in a quagmire again. Remember, Israel had to withdraw in 2000 after suffering casualties and crises at the hands of Hezbollah, which was formed to defend southern Lebanon from the Israeli occupation. Hezbollah was said to have been weakened. Netanyahu said, we've basically defeated them, sent in his troops. Hezbollah is staging more operations than we saw in 2024 when they were at war with Israel, and operating from a position of more strength. Hezbollah is operating, I think, in a stronger position tactically now, and they have a certain strategic advantage over Israel, which is that Israel has to hold this territory that they've captured. They're in a race to blow up and destroy as many homes as they can in southern Lebanon as possible, to destroy the support base of Hezbollah, which is the Shia population of southern Lebanon. And they're getting hit with these FPV fiber optic drones that are just simple 3D printed drones. Israel can't stop them. And so day after day, they're losing one or two soldiers. Armored personnel carriers are getting hit. Excavators are getting hit. And the losses are starting to pile up, and it's becoming a real political problem for Netanyahu, who would lose the election if it were held today. And the problem is only going to mount. And it's also a humanitarian crime. It's a real crime against this people of southern Lebanon, who are such dignified, steadfast people, just to see them lose their homes, lose medical clinics, have hospitals be bombed, churches are being bombed, to face this humiliation. But that's the cost of having Israel as your neighbor.
Yeah, Max Blumenthal, thank you so much for your time. Again, Max, tell everybody anything you have coming up for the Gray Zone, or.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot coming up, but the work we're featuring from Wyatt in Lebanon is really special. And so subscribe to us on YouTube and you'll see all that, and Substack as well. It's free to sign up for us at Substack, and you'll get everything in your email, every day. So